Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. My name is Lauren Barrett. I'm a winemaking specialist with Enartis, and today I'm excited to present a kind of a newer format where we're going to be having a plant-based winemaking discussion. We're going to be looking at opportunities here in the U.S. Wine industry for adopting some of these non-animal alternatives. Now, in this presentation, I'm going to just do a brief introduction where I'll talk about non-animal winemaking techniques as well as some compliance information. But then we're going to get into some interesting discussions that I've had with some of my colleagues in South Africa, as well as Australia, New Zealand, the European Union, and then kind of finishing with a discussion here with my colleague from the US. Now, this presentation is really more about trying to learn from other components of the wine industry and from the world. So if you're looking for more of a technical presentation, we have plenty of that. It's all cited in the resources and citations of this presentation. And we're happy to help if anyone has any questions about the technical aspect of some of these agents. But this really is supposed to be more of a discussion and hopefully a learning experience for us all. It certainly was for me. Really, traditional fining agents used in winemaking are proteins of animal origin. Now, these include pig skin gelatin. There is some beef gelatin out there, but mostly it's pig. And then there's potassium caseinate, egg albumin, isinglass. There's also fish gelatin. And as well, blood albumin was historically used, but due to the bovine spongiform mad cow epidemic that happened, over 20 years ago now, that's no longer an approved additive. Now, each agent's composition, its origin, and its specific hydrolysis affect their mode of action in fining and their application, from whether that be for must stabilization and clarification or for fine-tuning fining wine. Now, egg albumin and casein are definitely the main animal proteins used in fining worldwide, which both actually require allergen labeling as well, if there's a specific amount of residuals, or depends on the country. But pork derived protein is one of the most common proteinaceous agents used as well, as it really has a preferential mode of action against high molecular weight tannins. Now, alternatively, plant-based proteinaceous fining agents extracted from legumes, potatoes, and algae have been around for over 20 years with historical use in Europe, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. And now with the growing demand for more plant-based or vegan, and also this push for more low intervention wines, it's really important that we start to adopt these products into our legislation and our winemaking. So legume-based proteins or PE-based proteins can be used as an alternative to caseinate and gelatins. And again, similar to animal proteins, their hydrolysis level alters their reactivity with different wine components. So this really allows for more targeted processing and application. Pea protein is really effective in accelerating white must and white wine clarification, with similar aroma reduction seen in other commercial fining agents applied for that type of clarification. It's also really effective in removing phenolic compounds with similar sensory impact to other animal-based commercial fining agents like casein or PPPP, even though it's not animal-based. But then potato protein is also really great for reducing astringency and is a great alternative to gelatin for fining red wines, as there's really a minimal effect on wine color, and there can be a significant reduction in phenols and tannins. It's also been tested as a must fining agent, and its efficiency is really similar to potassium caseinate and bentonite. Now, in the supporting material of this presentation, we have some recommendations of non-animal fining agent alternatives, and we won't be going into as much technical detail, as we have a lot of supporting material cited that we recommend that you check out for more detailed information. This is also a really great review I have at the bottom of this slide, which is looking at comparing wine fining with plant protein. So make sure to check that out in the supporting material. Now, I wanted to present some data just on current plant-based trends and consumer demands. Unfortunately, there wasn't really too much available specifically to non-animal or plant-based winemaking or vegan wine, but there was a lot of information about consumers' willingness to pay for whether there be biodynamic or sustainable wine products. And within this, actually, this is a sustainable review cited below here. looking at different the wine production chain and also consumers' willingness to pay, they saw a significant increase in consumers willing to pay a higher dollar for, some of these wines, which are more in the sustainable category, let's say, which I definitely think plant-based wines would be. So the data that I'm showing you here is actually from the Good Food Institute. They are a institute which is really focusing on trying to find plant protein alternatives to animal proteins, especially in the food market. And with what they've seen and the data that they're sharing here is that grocery sales of plant-based foods that directly replace animal products grew by 27% from 2017 to 2019. And in 2020, the total plant-based marketplace is currently at $5.6 billion and growing 30% year over year, compared to only 15% growth of the food and beverage market. So that's quite significant. There's been a very, very high increase in demand for some of these plant-based alternatives from consumers, and wine consumers are definitely picking up with this trend as well and becoming much more aware of what's going into their food products. So it's definitely important that we start to adopt some of these plant-based alternatives, as the market is really demanding it, as we can see. Now, one of the only vegan certifications that I could find really was through veg, and so that is a vegan certification as well here in the US, but I'm sure that there's many more out there worldwide. So I wanted to touch briefly on US compliance and wine treating material. First things first is I am not a compliance expert by any means, and it's really important that you work with your compliance team internally to make sure that you're, number one, following the laws, and that you're keeping everything organized and in line. But I just wanted to briefly kind of go through it just so you guys can understand what the current standings are as far as treating material for non-animal and then animal-based fining agents. So on the 24-246, the Code of Federal Regulations, this treating material is basically, it went through an industry member approval, and it's for wines that are destined for domestic consumption as well as export. So it's kind of a consensus among the different countries that these types of wine treating material are okay. And there is a lot of animal-based protein fining agents on this treating material list, but there's unfortunately no plant-based alternatives approved thus far, and this could be extremely limiting for producers who are looking to export. Now on the 24-250, we have treating material that has administrative approval from the TTB, and it's for domestic consumption only, so you're not going to be exporting these wines. There is a process, I think, where you can, but just to keep things simple, and for the most part, people who are using treating material in the 24-250, that is wines destined for domestic consumption, definitely make sure to talk to your compliance specialists to learn more. But on that treating material list, we do have potato protein available to us. So at least we do have that. And we also have casein, which is a fungal derived fining agent. So here we have the Plantis AFP, which is our pure potato protein in our portfolio, and the Plantis PQ, which is a really great efficient blend of ketosane and the potato protein. Now that brings me to the 24-249. So this is actually for experimental use with new treating material or a process. Now, the TTB requires that you submit an experimental use letter, and there's some different rules associated with that. And depending on their approval of the experimental letter, wines may or may not be sold, and it's important to keep these wines separate, of course, during the experimental process. And from what we've found is that there's been many clients who have been submitting pea protein experimental use letters, and they have been getting approved under the continual good use. So that is promising, and hopefully soon this video will be out of date and we'll have the pea protein available on the 24-250, or even better, have potentially potato and pea protein approved for the 24-246. But at this time, unfortunately, pea protein, which is a very efficient plant-based alternative to animal products, it's not approved as treating material. So really the goal of this webinar is to learn more about the application of these plant-based products, but as well, we want to try to encourage clients to submit experimental use letters, and we're very happy to help you with that process, just so we can have these tools available to us as an industry. Here, I'm just going to briefly touch on allergen labeling domestically and globally. We'll see how this changes in the future, but currently in Australia and New Zealand, if there is any egg, milk, fish, or crustacean product used in the process, they must declare that on the label itself. So you can see here, you can see, all right, so we have the contained sulfites. All of these countries as a whole have come to the consensus that sulfite allergen labeling is required at levels above 10 milligrams per liter. So everybody's on the same page there, but it does very much so for allergen labeling. But you can see here for Australia and New Zealand that finding agent milk products, so they're actually listing that on their labels and are required to. In Canada, they are also required if there's residual amounts of more than 1 milligram per liter. And then for the European Union and South Africa, we see that it's that 0.25 milligram per liter residual limit. Now, here in the US, we just have voluntary labeling. So even if our wine has been fine and contains any sort of allergen, we do not have to label it. There are some producers here in the US that are putting those finding agents on their label. And I think that transparency with the wine consumer is actually a pretty useful marketing tool. And we'll see, in the future what happens with labeling, especially as our wine consumers are becoming more educated and wanting more transparency. So I just wanted to briefly go over that with you all. So now I'm going to go ahead and start to share some of the discussions that I've had with my colleagues, first starting with plant-based winemaking in South Africa. Thank you guys for joining me. How are you?
Hi, very well. How are you? Hello. Thank you for having us.
Good, yes, good. Yeah, thank you. Before we start, talking about non-animal and plant-based finding agents within your market, I was hoping that you guys could just give me some of your professional background and just your experience with Enartis South Africa. Jaco, I don't know if I'll put you on the spot first.
Okay, cool. So I've been with Enartis, I think yesterday it was 18 years. Wow. So I'm in the position of sales manager. So I've got a lot of the major wineries, and then I have a supportive role of our sales force.
Okay, great. And Antoinette?
Yeah, so I'm Antoinette van Zyl. I've been with Enartis for 8 years now, since 2013, as a sales representative. I've also been very involved with the laboratory. Jaco and I actually started out our stabilization laboratory back then. So I started out as an analyst, and then eventually my role became more in the sales force as well. So yeah, it's been good.
Oh, great. Great. Well, it sounds like you guys have a lot of experience and tenure with the company, and of course with working within the South African market. We're really trying to just get a better perspective of non-animal and plant-based finding agents use, in South Africa, Australia, as well as with our partners in Europe. Here in the US, we're pretty limited as far as treating material that we can apply. So we have potato protein available to us, but unfortunately, pea protein has yet to be approved by the TTB as treating material. So considering that, I kind of wanted to hear about your the background with the approval of some of these non-animal and plant-based finding agents, how long they've been in use in the market in South Africa, and what trends you guys have kind of seen maybe in the last 5 years.
Antoinette, should I go? Or?
Okay, I can give my 2 cents first. Well, I've been with Enartis for 8 years, as I've mentioned, and since I've been with Enartis, long as I can remember, these products have been available on our range. I also saw from my latest, from all the legislation that I could find on file since at least 2015, these products have been approved for use in South African wine, but it can be way before that. I'm not 100% sure how long it goes back. And as far as usage of these products and success with these products goes over the last few years, I would say from my experience in the field, in the beginning stages, it was a very slow reception to these products. Winemakers in South Africa weren't as warm to it as they are now, but the pressure has kept on building over the last few years. And I would say the last 2-3 years, they have become under a lot of pressure to start thinking vegan. Yeah, I don't know if you would like to add, Jaco.
Yes, I can add. I can tell you that Enartis has had plant-based fining products in their arsenal for probably 15 years. It was way ahead of its time.
Wow.
I think at that stage it was in Europe. They started using it in Europe. In the last about 5 years ago, we started selling it a bit, mostly as an alternative to casein. But then the uptake wasn't so big because South Africa is quite a big bulk wine market. So price-wise, it's quite a bit more expensive than the traditional gelatin and bentonite combinations. So there wasn't really a reason, and people were skeptical that it wouldn't work so well. And in the last 3 years, the trend has gone upwards. But I mean, especially from this year on, there's so much pressure on the wineries to start using it, from big supermarket brands, that they don't have a choice anymore. I mean, they're forced to use it. And so we've seen exponential increase in sales. Exponential.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of this is coinciding with, there was a Netflix documentary that came out a few years ago, which was called The Game Changer, really focusing on plant-based alternatives. And, of course, these vegetable proteins, a lot of the catalyst for the wine industry exploring that came from like the mad cow epidemic and everything that happened almost 20 years ago. So these agents have been available for a long time. And as you just mentioned, Jaco, for it being within our portfolio for 15 years. But yeah, I guess I'm also curious, do you see the clients really comparing them side by side and it being a feasible alternative with some of these agents? Or what's kind of some maybe more trial or harvest examples that you guys have experienced with kind of maybe comparing gelatin to pea protein, or maybe a product within our range?
Well, we have gone to see 2 important customers of ours who have started using a product called Enartis AF, which is our pea protein. And the 2 customers in question, they used it for 2 separate objectives. The first customer used it with the objective of replacing gelatin for flotation. And they really wanted to use something without changing the process at all. They didn't want to have a longer or a shorter contact time. They didn't want to change anything in their process. So that was their objective and their goal. And they used 10 grams of hectoliter of this Enartis AF instead of gelatin with really good results. They used to use gelatin in combination with a flotation bentonite as well. So they used Enartis AF in combination with the same bentonite and got good results. And when they were forced to not use the bentonite in conjunction, they got even better results in terms especially of lees percentage. So in combo with the bentonite, they got 15% lees, and the Enartis on its own, they got 8%. So I mean, that was really good for them, and they were very satisfied. They didn't have any issues with lees settling down, forming kind of an Oreo cookie situation. It worked really effectively, and they would float with the product in the evening for 15 to 20 minutes, leave it overnight, and then rack off the next day. So about 8 hours in contact with the plant is safe. So in that instance, they were really happy. Compared with gelatin, they got aromatically better wines. They were actually very surprised. I think they went into it feeling a little bit nervous and, stepping into strange territory. They had a system that worked. They didn't really want to mess with it, but because they were under so much pressure to go vegan, they were forced to try Plantis AF, and they were pleasantly surprised. Customer B used it for a little bit of a different reason. They just wanted to soften out wines that was a little bit rough around the edges. They've been using it for 3 or 4 years. They would add it during fermentation. They would find that around 3/4 in, fermentation gave them the best results. They would get fresher wines, softer wines, and they've just been using it for their premium wines for the last 4 years.
Yeah, gotcha. No, that's great, especially with flotation, the application with flotation. More and more people here in California are starting to float. And yeah, I've done some comparative trials with the potato protein, since that's one of the few options we have available. And the pea protein is extremely effective, especially the Plantis AFP. But yeah, so it's something that you're seeing more and more clients becoming more open to and trialing at least. And I guess what would you say like the increase in demand for this harvest was for some of these agents with clients, and what do you see really happening in the future as well with just the trajectory that you've observed?
I can maybe just add something to what Antoinette said. Customer A, and it probably some of your people, you've got very big wineries in the US. So for example, customer A is a winery that does about 32,000 tons of grapes. They crush about 32,000 tons. So they've got a huge tank turnover. So number one priority for them was not to lose time. And obviously, it needs to make financial sense at the end of the day. And for them, it fitted in quite well. And it's quite a bit more per liter, but it made financial sense. The quality of the wine was just much better. So I think a lot of the bigger wineries in the US would probably be worried about the same issues, and there's no need to worry. We've had various big wineries having great results, and for us, I think for us it will probably be, my estimate would probably be, it will be one of our biggest growing ranges in the next 2 or 3 years, definitely. Yeah. If we had 3 times the amount of stock which we did, we would have sold 3 times the amount of.
Wow.
Yeah, we ran out of stock quite soon in the season.
Wow, that's definitely telling, just because yeah, you guys are one of the major exporters to the rest of the world as well. So yeah, thank you so much for just allowing us to talk with you and get your perspectives, because we have a lot to learn still here in the States, and hopefully with the TTB and everything, things move as far as the approval of the pea protein. But yeah, that being said, thank you so much, both of you, for joining me. And I definitely think that there's a lot of crossover, and we can learn a lot from our South African neighbors. And yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to add.
I think for you guys, as soon as as a product, historically, as soon as the product gets approved in the US, you guys have much higher adoption rate than our market, because I think we're way more conservative than you guys. So for plant-based finding agents, I really see a very bright future in the US.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks again so much, guys, and I appreciate you taking your time. And we'll be in touch, I'm sure, in the future to continue to have discussions like this about relevant winemaking topics. So thanks.
Sure. Thanks so much.
Now we're going to continue our journey and talk about plant-based winemaking in Australia and New Zealand.
Hi, Darko. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me to talk about plant-based and non-animal winemaking techniques. I was hoping that you could just give us all a background with your history with Enartis, what your role is with Enartis Australia and New Zealand, and it'd be great to hear about how harvest was since you guys just wrapped that up recently.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks for inviting me. Always pleasure. Then to introduce myself, my name is Darko Bradovic. I'm Market Development Manager for Enartis Pacific last 13 years. Vintage just finished in Australia. It was longer than for many years, and it was bigger than for the last few years. But also, we hope to have really good quality. Plant proteins really started being used in Australia and New Zealand. We don't agree 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe
okay.
Some serious trials were done, but real explosion, I would say, happened 2 years ago. From 2 years ago, almost everyone is using plant protein for juice fining, for white fining, and red wine fining.
What's the most popular application of some of these alternatives to animal protein?
It would be must fining of white wines. As we all know, New Zealand is more white wines or white juices and wines. Then that's where application is 100%. Plant proteins are used in fining must of Sauvignon Blancs in New Zealand. But there is application in red wine and gaining popularity and red juices. Then
are you guys still really selling a lot of, the Golden Clar Instant, some of our gelatins and animal-based products in the Pacific, or?
Animal-based products almost disappeared.
Wow.
Disappeared. You struggle to find winery that will use still gelatin. Egg white, for a few years, we don't see it in Australia. Plant proteins took over. And as I said, plant proteins, maybe with a combination of other
mushroom derived, or non-animal. And so that's in the last 2 years, you've seen almost 100% adoption rate for these.
Trials were done 4 or 5 years, as I said. And even earlier, we had products that weren't gluten-free, and they were trialed, but they didn't really take over. But in the last 4 years, we got wineries switching to plant proteins, but last 2 years, explosion happening, miracle happening. No one want to talk anything else than plant protein when it comes to fining.
It's kind of the same story, just talking with Jaakko and Antoinette too. They said the same thing. Within the last 2 years, they've seen this huge demand from wine consumers and our clients. But I think it's really important that people here in the US start to trial and use these compounds, just because from what I've heard, at least in learning from talking to Jaakko and Antoinette in South Africa and from you, it's amazing that already majority of the industry is already using and it completely adopted these. So there must be, sufficient evidence of their efficiency as being alternatives to a lot of the animal.
It's a combination of sufficient evidence, and they say that 2% of people on this planet, I think, but maybe in Australia, I have to read that article again, are vegans, but and they want to drink wine. But those 2% can really complicate your life if you have to separate wines that are treated with animal products and wines that are treated with this. Then it was logical, it was smart to really switch to products that work as well and in most of instances economical as protein fining agent. And you're not spending more money and you're achieving great result.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I guess from your perspective, what do you see for the US, and what are kind of your predictions that you see just in regards to our industry here? You've visited many times and you're familiar. What's your predictions for the US and non-animal based winemaking?
Yeah, we visited many times, but with bloody COVID now, yeah, haven't visited. What's this now? More than a year, and who knows how long. But I always thought, yeah, Australia and US, or Australia, New Zealand, and US, always applied similar thinking. Consumers are in similar state of mind. I just can't see, and I'm a bit surprised that today talking with you that plant proteins didn't take really more in US, but it's certainly going that way. I think there's the same way of thinking for consumers here and in US.
Yeah, I agree, and that was some of the same points that Jaco and Antoinette brought up as well. But Darko, thank you so much for taking the time to just discuss opportunities with plant-based and non-animal finding and winemaking techniques. Hopefully in the future we could collaborate more and continue to have discussions like this. I think it's really important for us to just to connect and talk, because we have so much crossover and applicable winemaking philosophies from Australia, New Zealand, and here in the US. So
oh yeah, same here. We should see more, but yeah, I'm sure winemakers and artists will have great success with this product. And we didn't go into details of different products, but they are really well researched, and various combinations that make them applicable for various wines. Then good luck, and anytime, please.
Yeah, thanks, Darko. Have a good one.
Bye. Thank you very much. Bye.
We're going to go ahead and start to talk to my colleague Mattia, who is based in Italy, and talk about plant-based winemaking in Europe.
Thank you to invite me to this presentation. And my name is Mattia, and I'm the wine technical support for Enartis International. And my role is to help Australia, New Zealand, and Central East Europe mainly. And so to support the wineries for any technical issues or for everything, basically what they need. Mm-hmm. So I used to travel a lot before this hard timing of COVID. Yes, I used to travel a lot.
Yeah, and I know that you've been to New Zealand and Australia. It seems like you've specialized within the technical team a lot with the flotation. So I know that you had some data that you wanted to share with us, and that would be great to go through. And I'm also curious to hear about Europe too, just because we haven't really touched on how the European market is demanding, if they're demanding non-animal wine, non-animal produced wines, and what you've seen as far as winemakers adopting plant-based alternatives within Europe.
Yes, exactly. I'm in Enartis since 3 years, and I'm following also trials and flotation trials. But before, I worked for more than 10 years in wineries, and we use flotation always quite a lot all around the world, in New Zealand, Australia, and Europe as well. And exactly as you said, in the last few years, we can see it more and more and more that the gelatin animal proteins are replaced by the plant proteins. If I can spend a couple of words, quick words about the history of the plant proteins, was Eseco Group, our mother company, Enartis mother company, that started to develop back in the years in 2005, 2006. We start to develop this product, the plant protein, an alternative to gelatin. The main reason was because of the mad cow disease.
Yeah.
So after that, we developed exactly the year after, because we start to study on it 1996, 1997, and after a few years of studying and applications, and after the mad cow disease, we came in the market with our planties, and we started with pea proteins and gluten proteins. Then, of course, the way of gluten proteins ended pretty fast because it is an allergenic. But the pea proteins are still in the market and they're working very well. In the last 10, 12 years, now I'm not sure exactly, but also potato proteins came in the wine world. The big plus is because, of course, it's not animal derivative. So even for vegan and for biodynamic, I mean, for this new trend, it is very helpful. And also the effect of plant proteins is really comparable with the animal gelatin, with some plus, because during flotation, for example, even with the static clarification, we are able to remove more yellow color, for example, in white wine, or catechins or polyphenols that we don't want to have in our wine. So yes, it is a very strategic application. About Italy, now, what can I say? Most of the wineries are using plant proteins. Not all of them, because we have a big tradition in gelatin as well. But for example, in Prosecco, almost 100% of the wineries are using plant proteins. In Tuscany, many wineries, all of them tried plant proteins. Some of them are still keeping 50 gelatin in some wine that they found a recipe in this way. Some other one change with plant proteins. But it's a practice that is very, very, very used all around Italy, in New Zealand and Australia, where I work as well. It is all of the winery in Marlborough region, Sauvignon Blanc. You find our planties and plant proteins in general everywhere.
Yeah, that's what Darko was saying. It's like 100% adoption rate, which is surprising. And I can see the theme with, in Prosecco, with the amount of export that they're doing to the rest of the world, and with more and more wine consumers wanting to understand what's going into the winemaking process, it makes sense. So yeah.
Exactly. It increases the shelf life of the wine as well, because you remove the oxidative molecule like catechins or some oxidative polyphenols. But let's have a look to some data that I wanted to show you.
Sure.
For example, here, this is a slide after a flotation trial in a winery in Italy. And so it's comparing our gelatin, Hydroclar 30, this is just one of our gelatin from our range, to different plant proteins from our range. So it is Plantis AF, that is pea proteins, Plantis AFQ, that is a blend between chitosan and pea proteins, Plantis AFP, that is potato, Claril QI, that is a chitosan-based product. So here, what I wanted to show, because I seen that Darko before show you the clarification of the wine. Here is juice, is flotation. I wanted to show you how is the increasing of reduction of oxidative polyphenols comparing the gelatin to the plant proteins. The pea proteins can go till 10.5% of the EPT less than the control. The gelatin is only around 7%. Pea proteins blended with the chitosan can go till 13%. So there is a huge
here. Yeah.
Yes, there is a huge decreasing of the amount of the oxidative polyphenols that we have comparing to the control. So that means a longer shelf life and better quality of the wine. It's not only about the NTU, the clarification.
Yeah.
In this other slide, we are talking about catechins reduction. Again, have a look the gelatin, that is the hydroclara, go from 40.9 to 37.9, so almost nothing. The reduction is none. But if we go to see the other products, so the P-based plant proteins go from 43 to 33, and plant proteins with ketosan from 60 to 38. So anyway, I don't want to go too deep in details, but I want just to underline that the effect on clarification is very similar between gelatin and plant proteins. The effect on reduction of polyphenols, oxidative polyphenols, there is a huge difference between the two products.
Yeah, especially with the ketosan blends, it looks like too.
The blended between pea proteins and ketosan, or potatoes proteins and ketosan is quite. I mean, it works very, very well. Yes.
Synergistic. And then we have here a comparison among red wine. Okay.
Yes, this is the slide that I think Darko showed you before. Is on red wine and is showing the dropping of NTU in turbidity. So Plantis PQ is the one that shine more in this case. So the dropping of NTU from 620 to 104, so comparing to gelatins and to other plant proteins, and can manage to reduce a lot of the NTU, but at the same time avoid the loss of color intensity.
Yeah, and that's one of the few products that we have approved on the 24-250 treating material here in the U.S. is the Plantis PQ. So it's a good option, at least with some of the few options that we have.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah. Well, Mattia, thank you so much for taking the time to talk. Is there anything else that you want to add? And maybe what opportunities do you see for us here in the U.S. market with non-animal, plant-based
yes,
wine?
I want to say that finally, also in U.S. market, you can have this upload using plant proteins, because they fit very well all around the world. And they will fit also in U.S. market, from big wineries to small wineries.
I agree. And with the client demand kind of increasing for more plant-based alternatives, and for people wanting more transparency with, the food products that they're buying, it's something it's inevitable. It's going to happen, and we're going to make that shift. The other day, actually, I saw this article about plant-based biodynamic winemaking, and how now consumers are starting to even look at, viticulture inputs as well, which, so hopefully
it's going more and more in that direction. Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting to say the least. But thanks, Mattia, for joining me, and I'm sure we'll be in touch soon. But good to see you. Bye.
Thank you, Lauren. Good to see you.
Now I'm joined by my colleague, Julia. She is the technical sales representative for Enartis here in the U.S. for Anderson Valley, Mendocino County, Lake County, Sonoma County, and as well as some parts of Napa. And she has a really great, deep understanding and perspective of her market. She's been with the company for over 10 years now, and we're going to talk about opportunities for plant-based vining in the U.S. So Julia, within your market, I'm just curious, what has been the main demand as far as non-animal and plant-based? Have you seen a trend more for trying to replace animal products? I'm curious to hear about your region in Northern California specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot. The general public is looking for plant-based and allergen-free products. So there's a very high demand, and there's a lot of applications for these products, and, you know, in preparation to remove copper findings, for instance, to refresh a wine, for microbial protection. So there's a lot of options out there that are plant-based that are being embraced.
Yeah, I think then hopefully we can generate some more interest just from this webinar and people who want to start to use these products, because eventually they're going to be approved, and you know, people are going to have to start you know, becoming more familiar with these products.
There's labeling concerns, and you know,
exactly.
Horizon, people are very health conscious now, and they want to have that availability of whether it's vegan or plant-based or allergen free. People want, we all want that alternative available.
Yeah, I agree. And no, I think it's great that here at Enartis, we're really trying to, you know, be there for our clients and help them with this process too, if they're interested in, you know, submitting an experimental letter. And we want, you know, to have these tools available to our clients and to the industry as a whole too, just because we need to kind of all start to explore different treatment material, different processes that are going to, you know, elevate wine quality. And then at the end of the day, just help create more of a circular economy and more of a sustainable industry as a whole. But thanks, Julia, for tuning in. And hopefully if any of your clients are interested, they can reach out directly to you. And with the rest of the US sales team as well, we'll make sure to make their contacts available for people who want to explore these plant-based alternatives.
Great. Thank you, Lauren.
Okay.
Thanks again, everybody, for your attention. I hope you guys like this new format that we've kind of set up. And more importantly, for clients who are interested in submitting experimental use applications to the TTB, please make sure to reach out to your technical sales representative, or feel free to reach out directly to myself. We want to help people with this process, and we really are hoping to push forward with more experimental use letters so that hopefully we can have all of these plant-based alternatives available to us with this growing demand that we're seeing within the market. Next, we'll have a few poll questions, which if you're interested in the TTB letter, definitely make sure you participate in, and then we'll start the Q&A. But thanks everybody for your attention.